Euzubillahimineşşeytanirracim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Rabbi şrah li sadri ve yessir li emri ve hlul ukdeten min lisani yefkahu kavli. Allahumme salli ala seyyidina Muhammedin ve ala ali seyyidina Muhammed. Selamun aleyküm ve rahmetullahi ve berekatuhu. Inshallah we are going to start a new section which is the fourth branch of 24th word. So 24th word and fourth branch. So this 24th word is an interesting chapter, like including seemingly unrelated topics, unrelated parts. With the first branch, we started with the diversity in creation, how we observe diversity in the creation, and how this diversity actually refers to diverse, let's say, set of names and their diverse levels of reflection on the creation. So the variety in the creation corresponds to variety of the divine names and their various levels of expressions, if you can say. And in the second chapter, I'm only giving, very like a small or gist of the chapter sections. Otherwise, of course, they are much more than what I say. In the second chapter, in the second section, kind of related to the first section, was why we see differences in the ideas of different scholars, or even in applications of different prophets, why there are different differences. Also, we, again, in the second section, we studied different paths that we can pursue to reach whatever we call as the truth, whatever we want to reach, and how these different paths, although somehow will take us to perfection, the perfections they can take us would differ. Meaning, there's one path among these three paths that we studied. Of course, these three paths representing many, maybe thousands of different paths in a nutshell. But anyway, we said there's one path among all these paths which would take us to utmost perfection, which was the path of full transparency, not in terms of being like open source, or being transparent in terms of the ideas, or how I act is how I think, not that way, but transparency in terms of the ownership of things that we seemingly possess, and saying that none of them belongs to me. And then in the third section, we studied how to read narrations from prophets. Not prophets, sorry, the prophet, our beloved prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. How we should read the narrations, and author gave us some principles, 12 principles, to read them properly. So far, we have context. We started with the diversity, variation. Thus, comes to the question: why should I follow a single path, Sharia or path of Prophet, since there are all these diversity in the creation, and I'm a different person? I may follow a path in which I rely on myself, or I rely on some ideologies, or maybe reasoning in general, not necessarily my own reasoning, but reasoning as an abstract notion. So why should I follow a so-called path of prophet? And then author, let's say, convinced us to follow the path of prophet In the third section, we say, okay, if you want to follow the path of Prophet, the first and foremost source of Prophet is his narrations. So you should study his narrations, and here are some principles to study them. And now in the fourth principle, the fourth branch, seems, again, at the first read, it seems author is changing the gears and starting talking about a completely different topic. Again, at the first read, we should keep this in mind, how this fourth branch is related to previous three branches.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. So thank you, Brother Birkan, for that really comprehensive summary you gave of just kind of orienting us on where we are in the text right now, and on, I guess, the purposes of the 24th word. So again, we're reading from the 24th word, the fourth branch. Online, it's on page 361. Fourth branch. Are you not aware that before God prostrate themselves all that are in the heavens and all that are on earth, the sun and the moon and the stars and the mountains and the trees and the beasts, and a great number among mankind? But a great number are such as are fit for punishment, and such as God shall disgrace, none can raise to honor, for verily God does what he wills. And this is from the Quran, chapter 22, verse 18. I feel like this, it's a little difficult to understand just the wording of this translation, so let me just read one more. It's the same verses, but just very slight differences that might be more useful. Do you not see that to God prostrates whoever is in the heavens, and whoever is on the earth, and the sun, the moon, the stars, the mountains, the trees, the moving creatures, and many of the people? But upon many the punishment has been justified, and he whom God humiliates, for him there is no bestower of honor. Indeed, God does what he wills. So I guess this fourth branch will be focusing on this verse, inshallah, and we'll try to understand it. We shall point out only a single jewel from the treasure of this extensive and sublime verse. It is as follows. The all-wise Quran states clearly that everything, from the heavens to the earth, from the stars to flies, from angels to fishes, and from planets to particles, prostrates, worships, praises, and glorifies Almighty God. But their worship varies according to their capacities and the divine names that they manifest. It is all different. We shall explain one of the varieties of their worship with a comparison. For example, and God's is the highest similitude, which is another verse, I believe. When a mighty lord of all dominion builds a city or splendid palace, he employs 4 categories of workers. The first category are his slaves and bondsmen. This sort receives no wage or remuneration, but for each item of work that they carry out through their Lord's command, they experience a subtle pleasure and pleasant eagerness. Whatever they utter by way of praise and description of their Lord increases their pleasure and eagerness. Knowing their connection with their holy Lord to be a great honor, they content themselves with that. Also, they find pleasure from looking to their work with the view of their Lord, and for his sake and in his name. They are not in need of any wage, rank, or remuneration. And I'm guessing remuneration means like compensation of some sort. I'm not sure. The second category are ordinary servants. They do not know why they are working or that they are being employed by the glorious Lord. He causes them to work through his own ideas and knowledge and gives them an appropriately small wage. These servants are unaware of what various and comprehensive aims and exalted matters result as a consequence of their work. Some of them even imagine that their work concerns themselves alone and has no aim besides their wage. The third category, the Lord of all dominion, has some animals which he employs in various jobs in the construction of the city and palace. He only gives them fodder, but their working at tasks suitable for their abilities gives them pleasure. 4. If a potentiality or ability is realized in action and work, there is a breathing in and expansion, and this results in pleasure. The pleasure to be had from all activity stems from this. The wage and remuneration of this sort of servant, then, is only fodder and that pleasure. The fourth category are workers who know what they are doing, and why and for whom they are working, and why the other workers are working, and what the purpose of the Lord of all dominion is, and why he is causing them to work. Workers of this category are therefore bosses and supervisors over the other workers. They receive remuneration that is graded according to their rank and degree. In exactly the same way, the sustainer of all the worlds, who is the all-glorious Lord of the heavens and the earth, and the all-beauteous builder of this world and the hereafter, employs both angels and animals, and inanimate beings, and plants and human beings in the palace of this world, in this realm of causality. He employs them not out of need, for the creator of everything is he, but for certain instances of wisdom, like the functioning of his might, sublimity, and dominicality. He causes them to worship and has charged these four categories with different duties of worship. I think I'll stop there because the text then goes into some categories which are very long-winded, and I think we can focus on this page and a half of these four categories, an analogy that Nursi's outlining. Going back,
may I recommend something if you don't mind?
I can hear your recommendation. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So I would recommend reading the first category as well. It's just like 1 page and quarter. Because what he does, like he listed 4 categories, and only through metaphor. So it's not obvious what he's talking about when he says first category. He's talking about the slaves and bondsmen, and then in the second category, ordinary servants. Then he started explaining what these categories refer to. And if we read the first category as well, where he says first category is the angels, now we will know what he's talking about when he says first category. So we could study, the first category as a metaphor and first category as truth, the hakikat. But again, this is just an idea. I don't know what our beloved moderator thinks. She may also consult to other people like Yusuf, but just as, again, a recommendation.
Thank you for that suggestion. I think I decree that it is an apt suggestion, and I think that would be a good idea. We can do that, since, as you said, it'll allow us to discuss both the analogy side and then what that analogy is supposed to be trying to help us understand. So let me read just about a page and a quarter more, if everyone's patience will permit, inshallah. So the first category, so this is the first category in reference to the first category are his slaves and bondsmen, I guess. So this is the explanation of that analogical side, I am supposing. The first category is the angels, who are represented in the comparison by the slaves. For the angels, there is no endeavor and progress. They all have their fixed station and determined rank, and receive a particular pleasure from the work itself and an emanation from their worship. That is to say, the reward of these servants is found within their duties. Just as man is nourished by air, water, light, and food, and receives pleasure from them, so are the angels nourished by the varieties of remembrance, glorification, praise, worship, knowledge, and love of God, and take pleasure in them. For since they are created out of light, light is sufficient for their sustenance. Fragrant scents, even, which are close to light, are a sort of nourishment for them, which they enjoy. Indeed, good spirits take pleasure in sweet smells. Interesting. Furthermore, there is in the tasks that the angels perform at the command of the one whom they worship, in the work they accomplish for his sake, in the service they discharge in his name, and the supervision they execute through his favor, and the honor they gain through their connection with him, and the immaculateness they attain through studying his dominion in both its outer face and its face which looks to him, and in the ease they find through beholding the manifestations of his beauty and glory. Such sublime bliss that the human mind cannot comprehend it, and one who is not an angel cannot perceive it. Very interesting. One sort of the angels are worshippers, and the worship of another sort is in work. Of the angels of the earth, the sort that are workers have a kind of human occupation. If one may say so, one type are like shepherds and another like farmers. That is to say, the face of the earth is like a general farm, and an appointed angel supervises all the species of animals within it through the command of the all-glorious Creator, and with his permission for his sake and through his power and strength. And for each species of animal there is a lesser angel who is appointed to act as a special shepherd. The face of the earth is also a place of cultivation. The plants are all sown in it. There is an angel charged with supervising them in the name of God Almighty and through his power. And there are angels who are lesser than him and who worship and glorify God by supervising particular species. The archangel Michael, peace be upon him, who is one of the bearers of the throne of sustenance, is the most important overseer of these. The angels who are in the position of shepherd and farmer do not bear any resemblance to human beings, for their supervision is purely for the sake of Almighty God, and in his name and through his power and command. Their supervision of animals consists only of beholding the manifestations of dominicality in the species where they are employed, studying the manifestations of power and mercy in it, making known to that species the divine commands by way of a sort of inspiration, and in some way ordering the voluntary acts of the species. Their supervision of the plants in the field of the earth in particular consists of representing the plant's glorification in the angelic tongue, proclaiming in the angelic tongue the salutations the plants offer to the all-glorious Creator through their lives, and employing the faculties given to plants correctly, and directing them towards certain aims, and ordering them to some extent. These duties of the angels are meritorious actions of a sort by reason of the angel's faculty of will. Indeed, they are a kind of worship and adoration. But the angels have no real power of disposal, for on everything is a stamp peculiar to the Creator of all things. Another's hand cannot interfere in creation. That is to say, this sort of work of the angels forms their worship. It is not a custom like with human beings. And that's the end of the explanation of the first category. So all of that was a mouthful. Let me go back now. Let's all of us go back to the beginning of the fourth branch. And I'll just post it in the chat box here for any newcomers. So just to share some of my own initial thoughts, and then we can open it up for others to also share their remarks. I know that this fourth branch, it's stating at least that it's going to be a sort of explanation, one type of explanation of this verse in the Quran. And I think it's a very lovely and interesting verse. It says again, it's calling kind of in this rhetorical questioning, inquiring way of, do you not see that everything in the heavens and everything on earth is prostrating to God? So the earth, the sun, the moon, the stars, the mountains, the trees, the living creatures, and many of the people. And it's asking me to really utilize my environment, because these are all things that I can interact with. I'm in the earth. I can see the sun, the moon, stars, the trees. I mean, these are just, I think, signifiers of literally everything that is within my sphere of experience. Do I see that it prostrates to God? And I guess this calls for an understanding of what prostration means, right? How do I see everything around me in prostration? And it's interesting because right after this sort of large divine claim of the universe really being in prostration, it seems to talk about punishment, adab, and that this sort of punishment is justified or fit, depending on the translation. And I mean, I don't know, I was just, I was just kind of reflecting on this verse and what it means, and hopefully we can try to understand this fourth branch as a means to understand this verse. So, and the author himself says, the all-wise Quran, well, first he says, I think, which is also important, we shall point out only a single jewel from the treasure of this extensive and sublime verse, which is that, I think, shows that, if this is the speech of my Creator, an eternal speech, the treasure of it is also, must be, in a sense, endless, and I can try to reach out and see what I can grab from it, what jewel I can grab from it, within my own circumstances and situation and existential inquiries and whatnot. And he says, the all-wise Quran states clearly that everything from the heavens to the earth, from the stars to flies, from angels to fishes, from planets to particles, so micro to macros, prostrates, worships, praises, and glorifies Almighty God. But their worship varies according to their capacities and the divine names that they manifest. It is all different. We shall explain one of the varieties of their worship with a comparison. So it seems like the aim is to understand almost the first half of this ayah. How can we understand the varieties of worship of everything in the universe, from the stars and the flies and the fish, from things that are called angels, apparently, from planets to particles. How can I see that they are in a state of prostration, state of worship, praise, and glorification? And so this comparison that we just read, he's outlining 4 different categories of workers. And I think our focus, since we read the respective explanation of this first category, will be, our focus will be on this of the slaves and bondsmen, which he equates with angels. And in this analogy of being within a city or palace, he says that these slaves don't receive any sort of compensation, but that they're compensation almost. I mean, they do receive a sort of compensation. It's just not in terms of the example material, but they are being compensated in a sense through a sort of subtle pleasure and pleasant eagerness. I think, compensation as a concept can be broadened in terms of if you still receive something, even if it's a feeling, then that in itself is a return to you, onto you. Whatever they utter by way of praise and description of their Lord increases their pleasure and eagerness. Knowing their connection with their holy Lord to be a great honor, they content themselves with that. Also, they find pleasure from looking to their work with the view of their Lord, and for his sake and in his name, they are not in need of any wage, rank, or remuneration. Before I continue further, and I, refer back to the explanatory part in the later part of this fourth branch. Would anyone like to say anything? Just in terms of how he's framing this fourth branch, what he might be building up towards, the verse that he's starting off with, anything that comes to mind or you find puzzling. I'm interested. I'm puzzled by many things, but I would be happy to hear anyone else's comments at this stage, unless in my own voice. And I know that's a broad question because no one really ever raises their hand when we ask, "What do you think?" Has to be a rather specific sort of question. But Brother Yusuf, please. Thank you. Go ahead.
Brother Birkan made an introduction to how this fourth branch is being located. It might be a repetition a little bit, but what I am seeing in here is so far. So now he is introducing worship. It's interesting how he brought this topic to the worship. He started with different manifestations in the existence, then different ways of different paths to reach to truth. And he concluded this section with prophethood. The path of prophethood being the most pure, if you like, or clear and short way of reaching the truth. And then he talked about some practicalities of prophets' teachings, how I can benefit from practical aspects of prophets' teachings. So it was because as if in the first and the second, things were a little bit abstract. When we came to the third, he started talking about a man who lived and who left some legacy behind. And how am I going to, how can I benefit from this legacy, like narrations? Because these are quite practical things now that we are talking about. So the person who found truth and who had been the teacher of that truth in a living form as a human being, so how can I benefit from that? So for the third one was about this. And now that we are coming to the fourth, he is starting to talk about worship. So worship is like my response to my creator. So at the first branch, he was talking about the creator manifesting himself in various ways. I was the recipient end of this relationship back then. Also in the second, he was showing me ways how I can reach this creator, or in the path of prophethood, how I can realize the closeness of the creator, the truth to me. And now in the fourth, we are starting to see that I want to respond back to my creator. It's not just a one-way relationship. It's not that I only know, oh, okay, yeah, there exists such a creator. But as I am realizing that I am being provided, I am being sustained, how do I respond back? I would like to respond back because this is part of human. If somebody makes me, let's say, favors, I would like to respond back. If I observe some beauty, I would like to interact with this beauty. I do not simply say, oh, there exists a beautiful painting over there. It's not like this. I would like to interact with it. I would like to go to try to learn more, and then I appreciate it verbally. If I get to know it's the artist, I would like to get to know the artist, so on and so forth. Now in this fourth branch, this reciprocating what I have been receiving so far is being mentioned. And while doing that, looking for different ways of worshippers in this existence is also being mentioned. It's not that I'm going to be the only being in this existence who is responding back. Actually, it is possible that I might be the only being who is being reluctant to or lazy about responding back. This is why in this verse, everything is worshiping the Creator, and a lot of men, this is how the verse was concluding, like the verse started saying that أَلَمْ تَرَ أَنَّ اللَّهَ يَسْجُدُ لَهُ مَنْ فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَمَنْ فِي الْأَرْضِ. So whatever is on the heavens, whatever is on earth is worshiping him. So this generalizing, is a sweeping generalization was being made until we came to human, وَكَثِيرٌ مِنَ النَّاسِ, and a lot among mankind. So it looks like I might be one of the few who is not responding back. So it is like you went to a conference or a class, everybody is taking notes very carefully, and you are the only guy who is on Instagram back in the back row. So just at this scenery, as if the lecturer reminding you, the guy on Instagram, saying that everybody is, look what everybody else is doing and what you are doing. Just to say that as if I am now in a congregation with everybody else, I'm supposed to respond back. So it's not, and when I say this, when I emphasize this congregational aspect of it, it makes me get excited, because just imagine yourself in any sort of congregation, even if it being cheering for your favorite soccer team. So when you do it as a group, let's say, it's something much more than just your thoughts being involved. Now you are being involved with your emotions as well. I think this is what is being depicted in here. And the scenery, the author is also following the order that the verse is following, starting with angels, then mountains, whatnot, then talking about beasts or the animals, and then eventually talking about humans, completing the picture as such. So just that much as an introduction. This is what came to my mind.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's really helpful. I mean, as you were saying, this, we started off in this 24th word with the first branch, and it's kind of taking us step by step from trying to understand the manifestations of the Creator, reaching the Creator, trying to understand the messenger, and now coming to a point where I ask, how do I respond back? How do I communicate back my state of being, my conclusions, that which I've confirmed back to my Creator? How do I give a response? And, the focus is here, as we can see just very early on this sort of prostration, worship, glorification, which are all, there might be distinctions to them, but I think they all are essentially look to each other. How is it that I can worship, respond back to my Creator, in that everything else in the world is apparently in this state of prostration, in whichever way they may exist? How can I also put myself into frequency with everything else in the universe, utilizing my free will? Yeah, I mean, I don't have much else to say at this point. If anyone else has other questions they want to share, we can kind of grab a hold of those questions and approach the text with those questions just to maximize our own individual benefits from them. I think approaching a text with questions allows us to further understand it, more kind of immerse ourselves into it. So, you know, if your question is literally, I don't understand what's going on, just say it. We'll put it in our pocket. Yeah, please, Brother Burkhan.
Assalamu alaikum. Like, I will not share some ideas for now, but if our moderator allows me, I want to request from Yusuf a memory of him, very like it related to this topic. When he was visiting the national park in Shenandoah, I guess, he had a experience. If he remembers, he might have shared before, but it's a perfect fit for this context.
I mean, I've got no objections on my part. Brother Yusuf can feel free to communicate his own stance on the subject. I would be eager to listen.
So in that trip, so we were just to make a little bit of advertisement first. We went to this Skyline Drive, and in there you need to drive slow. So it's a road that goes through the mountaintop from in between forest. So it was a beautiful scenery. We were hoping to arrive to hotel early, but we ended up staying there until after sunset, which was not planned. But anyways, so as we were going, time for Maghrib kicked in, and all the cars disappeared. There is no light whatsoever. It was dark, and Maryam was a little bit scared also, because as we stopped the car for the Maghrib prayer, there was this roaring of, is it crickets? This insects that are singing in the summer. Anybody can help me with the name of this animal? Okay, cricket, good. So, but the sound was like scary, to be honest, because it's total darkness, and when you look up, yeah, only Maryam was scared. So when you look up to the skies, it was also, since the city lights were not there, we were able to see the stars. And it was a new moon, so moonlight was not also blocking the stars. So in that environment, I felt the urge to call azan for Maghrib, because I felt embarrassed seeing that all those animals are now making a dhikr, remembrance, because they are doing it all together. They were as if in a worship. Right after the sunset, they started their worship, and we were reluctant saying that, shall we join Maghrib and Isha and do it at home, because we need to take wudu and it's dark and it's scary, whatnot. So but once I get off the car, I felt quite embarrassed saying that everybody else is worshiping in here except me. So then we did our Maghrib prayer in there, with the fear of a horse might be coming from behind, from between the bushes. But anyways, this was our memory about this. So it was a very beautiful, overwhelming scene.
Thank you for that beautiful memory, sharing that beautiful story. Yeah, I can imagine the scene myself, driving in very scary, isolated, foresty places, especially in states like Pennsylvania. There's a sort of eeriness to it, but it looks like you guys utilize that opportunity well, and put yourselves in alignment with the rest of the creatures there. And Nazor says horses are peaceful. I agree. Yeah, I mean, in those sort of situations, I guess there's a sort of instinct to sometimes just flee, or to listen more carefully and see what the experience at that moment offers. And I just, I'm thinking about, sometimes it seems like it's a matter of, even from this text right now here, of putting myself into sync with everything else around me. Because everything in the order is operating perfectly. And it's a matter of how I choose to utilize my free will so as to whether I choose to be in sync with the rest of creation or not. So thank you again, Brother Yusuf, for that. We can, these sort of stories and anecdotes add a lively color and personalize the text that we read. So they're very helpful, and others should not hesitate, even though my motivations are slightly corrupt in saying that, since I also don't want to speak all the time. But Brother Birkan, go ahead.
Jazakallah khair. So one point, so this is not just a response to a word that you use, but it's more general, of course, and I'm sure you didn't mean what I'm going to discuss right now. It's just, triggered some ideas. So when our moderator, she said, being in sync with the universe. So the way I understand being in sync in the universe, I look at the trees, I see them, how peaceful they are. They're just standing there, accepting whatever is given to them. They're not striving for like a perfection. They're not striving for, increase in their ranks, whatever. Same with the animals. I see them enjoy whatever they eat. They do some works, but they are content with, what is given to them. They're not looking for, more. And I say, okay, I will be like them. I will be like a tree. I will be like a dog. And we know such, ideologies exist. According to these ideologies, they say you should be like a water, you should be like a tree, you should be like air. Be in sync with, what you observe, what you see in the universe. And I think, again, this is just, the same word. I'm sure our moderator used in a different way. I think this is not the author is trying to say here. This is definitely not the author is trying to suggest us to do. I guess maybe the better way to describe is look at the universe, see how everything else fits to this big picture. And by studying them, don't be in sync with them, but study them so that you will know your place as well. Which, by the way, we will see, in the fourth category, is above all of them. So you are not sent to this world, to this creation, to this life, to be in sync with the universe. But I'm just using the author's, words. We should study what they mean. Not to be in sync with them or synchronized with them, but to supervise them. Even a more comprehensive supervision than the supervision of angels. This is your duty. This is your place. So you should look at all the other creatures, all other types of worships that you experience, that you observe in the creation, so that you will know the type of worship that you are supposed to do. You will know your purpose. Again, which is not being in sync with the universe, not imitating them, or not, participating them. So for instance, if Yusuf in his memory well, if he had decided to be in sync with these crickets, what he would do, he would start, making the sound that they do, which would be probably, funny from every aspect, especially for his wife, Maryam. But instead, what he did, he said, okay, everything is worshiping. And he questioned, what is my worship? And he said, do you know what? My prophet taught me about my worship. And part of it was calling for adhan. So he decided to call for adhan, not to imitate or join the orchestra of these crickets with their tongues, but instead, he said, I will do my worship, just like they do their worship. Again, I'm highlighting this to say that this is not a response to something, just a trigger some other ideologies that I, encountered before. The author is not saying something any similar to such ideologies.
Thank you, Brother Birkan. I think I need to say more words that trigger you, because one word led to a beautiful exposition by you. So thank you for that. Though, it occurred to me that the word, and even as I was saying, I was kind of reminded by some of those ideologies which you referenced, and I'm glad that it was a means through which you kind of provided this further commentary and reflections on it. And your triggered response kind of triggered me in a hopefully positive way as well. I mean, I think just to, not to again be stuck with semantics or anything, but I think one can be in sync with the universe in the sense that the author here is talking about. I think that Brother Yusuf, for example, being in sync with the crickets meant that the crickets were following their creational command, and he too had to follow his own specific creational command. I'm not disagreeing with the contents of what you're saying, but I think if something like the word sync is being in sync is being used by other peoples in different ways, we can reclaim such words and fill them with new concepts that align with, the conclusions that I come to. So I think that as a human being, I should be in sync with the universe. I see that everything is following its creational commands in a perfect way, Crickets cricket because they're meant to cricket. And I'm meant to perhaps supervise, observe, utilize my various qualities and potentialities in a way that is befitting to my humanness. And I do that. And I think that does put me in sync with everything else. So I think it's a matter of how we fill these terminologies. And I think it's useful to draw the distinction between them and the various different ideologies that may utilize them. But in doing so, try to fill it with our own understandings, inshallah. So that was great. Thank you. If no one else has anything else to say, and I see that we're 10 people, I'm not counting the extra Hamim host here. It'd be nice to hear different voices. Brother Muhammad Said, please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum. One thing, or the thing that got my attention here is that the verse, or the first time when I heard this verse while you were reading, I thought that the verse is saying that some people are worshiping, or most people are worshiping, but some people don't worship. But the author's understanding is not that way. And I checked it back, and actually the verse is not saying some people are not worshiping. The author, as like a first-person observation and getting guidance from this verse, he sees, maybe I'm jumping a little further, but just came to my mind. I would like to share it anyways. Since like the rest of the universe is positioned and according to will of their creator, and they are equipped with the same will according to will of their creator, and they act not by themselves but according to will of their creator. And that's why in the eyes of the this observer, the universe becomes a worshiper, as much as I am aware of, as much as this observer is aware of the fact that their activities are not stemming from themselves. So that's why it points to their maker's will and command. But when it comes to the, in the second category, he, interestingly, the people who are not responding to this reality of their being here, they are not aware of their being servants, but the observer is still seeing them as servants. That got my attention. It's something new for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Mohammed Said, for that beautiful comment, and for bringing us back into track with the text as well. Yeah, I think I think we didn't get into the second category much, but it really showcases that within the analogy, everything is in a state of serving, whether they know it consciously or do not know it. And it's a matter of, do you do it in your name or in his name? So I think we should explore that further, inshallah. And I think later on in this fourth branch, the author will kind of explicate further on the explanation of the second category. Right now, since we didn't really go too much into the first category, let's do that right now. So before I continue, though, I would like to hear Suhail. Please go ahead.
Well, you can go first. That's fine.
I mean, I was just going to go into the text further. So, into Nursi's explanation of angels. So you should go ahead. Whether it's really
so, I mean, to me, the most important aspect of this verse he's quoting is the word, like, are you not, the word in the Quran is dara, like, do you not see? And to me, that's maybe the most important aspect of this, that sort of, distinguishes man, and that he's, I think, trying to point out here. Because seeing, or not seeing as in, seeing, literally seeing, but then therefore seeing beyond what is apparent. I mean, there's two aspects. You see what's apparent, and therefore see what's beyond that which is apparent. You see the heavens and the earth. You see the sun and the moon and the stars and the mountains and the trees and the beasts. So all different levels of creation, and even other people. The question is, how do you see them, or how do you perceive them? Do you perceive them as, individual entities, independent entities that sort of exist on their own and are doing as they please and exist for themselves, for that matter? So to me it's to me it's irrelevant what somebody in a sense from the perspective of this verse, if somebody out there is conscious or not, that's not my business, or aware or not. The question is, am I aware, even of the person who's not aware, that he too in his own way, he or she in their own way, by the very fact that they exist, are submitting to their creator, because their existence, how they operate in this world, is dependent on him. You know, they don't do anything more than what's been bestowed upon them, just like the beasts or the animals, just like the trees, just like the mountains, just like the stars, like the moon and the sun. And so in a sense, to me, the most important aspect is of the verse is to pay attention to how the world is being created, and fundamentally for you, so you can make observations, so you can experience it and see what is happening, and see to how many different degrees things may worship their creator. There's not one degree. There are innumerable number of degrees. And that's what man can do. Man can appreciate the sun, the moon, the stars, the mountains, the trees, the beasts, and even other individuals who may or may not be aware. That's sort of the unique position of man amongst all of creation. So the issue of punishment pertains to me when I'm not aware. That's my punishment. Because then I think everything is acting independently, just like myself. So I'm deprived of awareness. Or as they say, seeing is believing. You know, I'm deprived of that aspect of man's worship. So I'm, in a sense, disgraced and without honor. Because on one hand, man is given this quality of being able to perceive and comprehend all degrees of worship by all levels of creation, and yet he doesn't make use of it, doesn't utilize it. And to me, as Nursi goes through here, in a sense, it's as if almost the pleasure that these different creations take from their own respective worship, it's as if it's almost for man himself to appreciate as well. In other words, it's like, you know, if somebody's child does something that their parent is proud of, it's like the parent takes pleasure from it. Likewise, man, by recognizing and appreciating all that is around him, that is prostrating before their Lord, he too takes, in his own right and degree, a sort of pleasure from it, as much as he is aware. And the highest degree is the degree in which you are able to comprehend all modes of prostration, all the tongues of, you know, worship from all different manifestations of his work. That's how it relates to prophecy, in, I think, which was the third branch. That's sort of you know, appreciating and realizing the manifestation of divine unity in this universe. And that's why man is central to creation here.
Thank you, Sahil, for those illuminating reflections. Yeah, I think what I do get out of the verse, part of what I get out of the verse is one of the essential questions, as you said. How is it that the world is coming into existence? How do I observe it to be such? And am I able to observe the various degrees of worship that's being displayed? Yeah, I mean, I don't want to just reiterate everything that you already said, but thank you for that. That was very nice and helpful. Does anyone else want to say anything at this point? If not, I have a question for everyone, which is, since this fourth branch, I mean, first he outlines the 4 categories within the analogy, right? Within the example. And then the last part we read was an explanation of the first category. So after reading this, it's hard to like even reference these because they're both called first category. But should we read the first category and then go into the explanation of the first category? Or should we go through all 4 categories as they are described within the example? Does that make sense? Can people give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down in terms of whether it made sense? Okay, everyone else is snoozing. Thank you, Awesome and Abdurrahman. Okay, so it makes sense apparently. Now, which one should we do? If you think, okay, all right, stop everyone, because I'm going to ask a different question. If you think we should go through just paragraph by paragraph up to the 4th category, you can raise your hand, raise your thumb or whatever. Or if you think that we should just go into the explanation of the first category, you can pick the coffee mug symbol. Okay, if that's clear, just go ahead. Oh, wow, okay, this is wow, unanimous vote, amazing. So then we're not going to go through all 4 categories. We're going to jump a little bit in the text. Okay, Brother Birkan, you're giving me mixed signals. All right, but I think everyone agrees. So, okay, so inshallah, I'm going to read this first paragraph again, the first category paragraph, and then afterwards, I'm going to jump to the explanation of the first category. Just want to make sure everyone's on the same page. I'm like blanking out on words. Okay. All right. So the first category are as slaves and bondsmen. This sort receive no wage or remuneration, but for each item of work that they carry out through their Lord's command, they experience a subtle pleasure and a pleasant eagerness. Whatever they utter by way of praise and description of their Lord increases their pleasure and eagerness. Knowing their connection with their holy Lord to be a great honor, they content themselves with that. Also, they find pleasure from looking to their work with the view of their Lord, and for his sake and in his name, they are not in need of any wage, rank, or remuneration. Excuse me. So now, within this sort of story, example, analogy, Nursi is saying that this first category are angels who are represented by these slaves, these bondsmen. And for the angels, there is no endeavor or progress. They all have their fixed station and determined rank and receive a particular pleasure from the work itself and an emanation from their worship. That is to say, the reward of these servants is found within their duties. So since we already read a lot of this, we can go line by line into this explanation. Asim is asking a question that I also had, which is slaves the correct translation from the original? Usually, I'm guessing, is it like abd, or is it just like, oh, it's köle, so that is like very literally just slave. Okay. Thank you for that clarification. So that can help us further understand. So, we read a page and a half of angels, and we'll go through it slowly, but I was, needless to say, quite puzzled by this part of the text because, I want to understand what are angels, and how can I make sense of the way in which Nursi is talking about angels in a way that is relevant to my life, experientially accessible to me, and not speculative. Sohail, I saw your hand. I just wanted to finish my sentence, even though I see that you wrote a comment. Can you vocalize it?
Oh, it was just to answer Asim's question. I think the reason he uses slave here and bondsman is because he's going to talk about why they are slave. There's no free will or no choice being made in prostrating before their Lord. Whereas Abd to me means somebody makes a conscious choice to worship. That's the difference. That's man.
Thank you, Sohail. That's actually very helpful. That is helpful. Right. And, the word slave is so difficult to work with, at least within, like, I can't ignore, like, the American context that we work with, and it's just, like, a weird word to use, but I guess conceptually we can, again, think of it as that which, represents a being that has no free will. So something that is unlike myself, a human. Okay, so again, he's saying for angels there isn't progress or a sort of aim or motive. Their reward is found within their duties. And that they receive a particular pleasure from the work itself. I mean, the wording of this makes me think, are these beings that can experience pleasure? And then at what stage does that become speculative for me to even think about, or what is at stake with the question of when I ask that? Yeah. But yeah, I'm a little confused on how to think about angels in such a way where I'm not just talking about them so as to sort of have this world building almost that's not useful to me, or that is at best speculative. How do I approach this? So okay, we have Brother Birkan can speak first, and then Brother Sohail can go ahead, and then after that I'd like to hear a few other voices if they are willing.
Jazakallah khairan. So regarding this last question of yours, how should I read this? How should I benefit from this text? Rather than, you said world building. I really liked it, like, building a Middle Earth. Okay, there are elves, they do this, they have such a language. There are orcs, whatever. Yusuf can talk more about them. Like all of them, not only orcs. But I guess the first word of the ayah that he referred, it kind of explains everything. It says, Alam tara. Like the translation is, haven't you seen? Didn't you see? Haven't you seen? Right? The past tense. Implying that you already seen this. You already experienced this. If you look at the creation, this is what you see every time. And what you see is, you will see everything is worshiping in different kinds. Mountains, skies, heavens, whatever on earth, whatever in heavens. Sun, moon, stars, mountains, trees, beasts, or let's say any living creature. Haven't you seen that? And we know that Quran asks such questions to imply that you've seen that. Like, don't you remember? Or just reflect upon them. Think about them. I know that you've seen them. I know that you see them all the time. Just remember, just contemplate. So I guess the same way we should read this text. When he talks about the angels, author says, okay, let's look at the angels that we always experience and see in creation. Let's look at how they worship as we see them. Let's look at what they enjoy as we see them enjoy. And let's see how they worship fits to our capacities, capabilities, or maybe it is not enough for us. Maybe we should go beyond that. So let's look at them. Let's think about them. Let's study them. Them is something that we always experience, always see, and benefit from them. Rather than, as you said, a word building, it is building on top of what we see. This is the basis, what we experience, what we see in the creation. And on top of that, we will build, or maybe we will discover, we will understand, we will realize our own purpose, our own type of worship.
Thank you, Suhail. You can start, and then Brother Yusuf, you can continue.
Similar to what was just said, you know, the way Nursi writes, generally speaking, to me, sort of indicates that he's aware of who his audience is. But I mean, if you read between the lines, you realize that these are just his conclusions. So he's not speaking like a traditional, you know, scholar or theologian and saying, here are the angels and this is what they do. But as Berkan pointed out, Nursi is very precise about the verse, because the Quran frequently inquires from man, what does he think? Or in this case, what does he see? So the question, the Quran is saying, like, what do you see? Or in other words, what's your conclusion about what's happening out there? You know, for you is what I'm the speaker saying? Am I what do you see what I am saying to be true? And these are Nursi's conclusions. And he recalls the verse, or part of the verse, and God's is the highest similitude. In other words, he sees a sort of hierarchy of things, just as the verse points out, or maybe not even a hierarchy, but different distinctions of creation, hence the city or analogy, because that's what his conclusion is when he looks out at the world. He sees rocks, essentially what are mountains, trees, animals, vegetation, planets and stars, and human beings. And God is the highest similitude. In other words, they all simply just point to, in other words, an absolute source. So he's seeing this sort of manifestation of him as a city or a kingdom, because that's what he concludes fundamentally from his observation. And I think this is like an important principle I take away from Nursi, is that while it appears like he may be just sounding like a traditional scholar, he's actually very precise in that he doesn't take any word from the verses in the Quran to be sort of careless or haphazard. He understands that the reason the verse is structured in that way, or spoken in this way, or revealed in that way, is because it's asking man to contemplate himself. What does he think about what his experiences are? And these are Nursi's conclusions.
So what's attracting my attention in here is beginning with the verse. So أَلَمْ تَرَ أَنَّ اللَّهَ يَسْجُدُ لَهُ مَنْ فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَمَنْ فِي الْأَرْضِ. So especially in this verse, it's not saying مَا فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَمَا فِي الْأَرْضِ, so whatever. It says whoever. Like this consciousness is being emphasized from the very beginning of this verse. And at the end of this verse, human is being mentioned, who I would consider as consciously, if at all, he or she is doing, frustrating the creator. So in this regard, as if the verse is saying that everything else in this existence must be or is consciously aware of their maker. Are you aware of that? I mean, in here, I am feeling like it is important for me to realize that the rest of the universe is consciously aware of their maker. I mean, it's not simply, just to give an example, when I look at the clock tells me time. So does the clock itself know about the time or not? I don't care for my practical reasons. I am interested in learning time. And when I look at clock, if I understand it, that's what matters for me. I don't care about if the clock is aware of what it is doing. Is this the case for the rest of the existence for me? Is it like I look at a tree, I get some message from the tree, and I don't care if the tree itself is, to some extent, aware of what is going on within itself? So my understanding in here, starting with angels, as if the author is saying that, to what extent are you aware of what a tree means, what a tree represents? So there must exist. So let's start from here. As a human, I am, and as being a specific human named Yusuf, I am aware of what's going on in me, which you guys are not aware of. So the consciousness of being Yusuf is being given to me more than it is being given to any of you. From outside, you can speculate about what's going on inside me, but to some extent, you will realize it. So when it comes to a tree out there, or a star, or a beast, or I don't know, moon, sun. So the consciousness, the aware of prostrating to the Creator and doing something as such, does it matter for me or not? So to me, the way I feel about it is, it matters to me because I feel about it like if a person I am talking to, if I know that this person is a robot, how I'm going to feel about it. On the contrary, if I know that this person is a conscious being, whatever I say is making sense to that person, and then this person is evaluating and feeling as I'm going through things, and then responding back to me, something that is more relatable to me in this case. If it was a robot, I will not take it as relatable. I will just take it as an information. I will ask something to the robot. Maybe the robot is going to give me a correct answer for my practical purposes. But now that we are talking about the purpose of this existence, I am asking questions to the trees, to the star, and to the moon. So when I receive an answer, so is this answer relatable to me? In the sense that the thing that I'm asking the question to, is it a conscious being? So this is why I think it is important for me, at least personally speaking, that the existence being conscious matters for me. And I think this is why authors start from angels here, saying that they are conscious beings. And then I look at it, okay, what sort of a thing I observe in that tree out there? So what sort of consciousness is there? What sort of choices do I observe in there? So are they, let's say, do I observe going against the commands, or do I observe perfectly obeying commands? So I guess if we follow this line of thought, then although this is a very summary text, the author studies it elsewhere in more detail, we can see that I can relate to when he says they are enjoying just obeying the command of their creator. How can I make sense of that? Because I guess nowadays, just to open up a small parenthesis, we might be enjoying this if, or at least potentially we can enjoy this when we are not eating during the fasting. I mean, I can understand when I eat a delicious grape and enjoy it, and then be thankful to my creator. In this case, I am receiving some sort of a payment. But when I don't eat anything, which is the case with the fasting, so is it like a total torture to you? Or within fasting itself, do you receive a pleasure? I think this sort of a pleasure is how I can relate to what it means, like an angelic way of enjoying the command, because there's no payment for that. It's not being paid with the regular understanding of getting a payment. Again, just to explain it. receiving the taste of a grape is a payment. But there is no such payment in not eating grape by the command of the Creator. But there is a joy potentially in there, which is by obeying the command of the Creator, I am remembering my neediness, and then through this experience of fasting, for instance, I am realizing that I have been sustained, provided, and then I have been the mirror of the beautiful names of my Creator. This becomes my joy when I obey the command and avoid eating with this command. This is something angelic. And how is this being reflected in the outside world? This is what author is saying, that this is what angelic means. And now look at the universe and observe what sort of experiences of joy, because I am getting paid with all different types of joys. What sort of a joy does the tree or the conscious being that is representing the tree shall be experiencing? This is how I understand in a nutshell.
سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين الفاتحة.